I'm starting with the conclusion. In today's episode of Versus, we're talking about Celestron C8s and the two probably current most common variants, which is the C8, which you can see up here, and the C8 EdgeHD. If you're imaging with an APS-C camera like the ASI 2600 MC Duo, the EdgeHD 8 Premium is probably worth it for you, especially if you don't want to fuss with cropping or anything like that. If you're mostly visual or planetary, a regular C8 is still a beast, and the Edge won't magically unlock any secret additional detail in those use cases. And if you want a budget imaging setup, the classic C8 up here with the f6 reducer and a small crop on APS-C, or if you're using like a 533 camera or a 585 camera, can get surprisingly close to the results of the EdgeHD. In making this video, there was a slight hiccup. So I originally planned one night of testing, and it turned into 2 nights because night 1 produced these weird star spikes on both scopes. I'll put up pictures of what it looks like right now. So this video evolved from just, EdgeHD versus C8, a straight up fight. It also sort of added in this new layer of how I found my real problem in my system that can ruin any deep space image, no matter what telescope you bought. By the end of this video, you'll hopefully know which one of these to buy for imaging, for visual, and for planetary use. And you'll also know this new thing to check in your own imaging train if your stars look like spike balls. Let's roll that intro. Hi, I'm Francisco, and this is Deep Sky Lab. I embrace my beginner status, and I try to do these experiments the hard way so that you don't have to. I'm always open to new information, so be sure to sound off in the comments and we can have a discussion about anything that we've discovered today. I absolutely love these sorts of comparisons because they can cost you real money, and worse, they can cost you clear sky time, which for some of us in some parts of the world is getting harder and harder to come by. And the reason that this comparison matters is simple. The EdgeHD costs more. The new price difference between the two is $300 to $400, and used, the price gap gets massive. You can get a used Celestron C8, like one of these, for anywhere from $400 to $600, and the EdgeHD rarely goes for less than $1,200. One of the reasons is these scopes have been in production for over 50 years, and you can find some real bargains, even on some of the more modern, like all black units like this, for easily under $600. So are you paying for real performance with that upgrade, or are you paying for a silver tube and the word Edge that's on a sticker on the side? Some quick definitions so that we're all sort of speaking the same language. First is the imaging train. That's essentially everything after your telescope. So here's your telescope. Your imaging train is everything after this part right here. That's your adapters, your spacers, your reducers, your filters, your camera, all of it. Second is the word artifact. Now that's basically something that isn't supposed to be in your image. It's something that isn't in the actual sky. So that could be reflections, spikes, weird glows, stuff that's usually caused by your equipment. And one more term you'll hear a lot with SCT imaging, and that's back focus or back spacing. I believe we've been using those interchangeably. And that's the distance from the last optical element, like a reducer or sometimes the back of the image exit flange, to your camera sensor itself. If that spacing is off, your star shapes can get ugly really fast, especially if you're using a reducer or the Edge. For this set of experiments, I originally picked 2 different targets on purpose. M34 is a star cluster with stars everywhere. It's basically truth serum for, edge of image and corner performance. I also chose M76. It's a compact planetary nebula. It's small and it's detailed, and it's a very realistic example of what I would want to post and use the SCT specifically to be able to capture because of its long focal length. Here's a capture plan for each target and for each setup. I shot 30 exposures of 60 seconds each, so a total of 30 minutes per target per scope. Then when I got into my processing software, I threw away the worst 2 frames based on FWHM and stacked the remaining 28 after registration. A quick definition, FWHM is an acronym for full width half max. It is technically a statistical term used in statistics to measure the average width in the peak of a data set. For us, it's basically how fat the stars are. A lower number typically means that a star is much sharper, and a lot of things can influence it. Your focus, your seeing, your mount stability, and the general quality of your optics. I did do the same reject rule every time, so I'm not cherry picking and only dropping bad frames from one or the other. I want to be super clear. I did not do a second night because I wanted more Edge versus C8 data. The last couple months have just been cloudy. I didn't want to basically burn a second night. Just for this experiment. I did a second night because night 1 produced artifacts that showed up on both scopes. And if I can't trust the stars or the setup, I don't know that I can trust the data at the end of the test. I noticed it the next morning when processing the images. At first, I thought it was an issue with the first set of images that I was looking through. And I was like, okay, man, there must be something wrong with my telescope. But then I saw the exact same artifact in the same orientation with the images from the other telescope. So night 2 began essentially as a troubleshooting mission, and I am glad that I did it because I uncovered something a lot of beginners run into, but there's a ton of different reasons why this can happen. And the important logic here is if both scopes show the same weird behavior, then it probably isn't the telescope, it's probably something shared between the setups as I was doing the imaging. So it could be something in the imaging train or something in dew control, right? Your dew heater or your dew shields, which I heard a lot in the comments because I did ask for feedback from the community. I'm like, hey, have you seen these sort of artifacts before? And you guys were really great about letting me know all the things that have caused that for you. Night 2 began as my detective mission. I started, I put one setup out there and I started swapping parts to find the source of the artifact. One other important difference between night 1 and night 2. On night 1, I ran the non-edge C8 at native focal length with no reducer. On night 2, I ran the Celestron reducer corrector f6.3 the whole night. This is a pretty common part that you can buy, and a lot of people really like these for the non-edge telescopes. And they're fairly simple devices. They just screw on to the back and they provide some correction and image flattening. So where night 1 was answering Edge versus C8 at f10, night 2 answers, besides the mystery that I was trying to solve, can a classic C8 get dramatically better with a fairly inexpensive reducer? And then can you crop that resulting image to match the framing of the edge? I also reversed the order on night 2, so the non-edge went first and then the edge went second, so that neither scope got a better or worse part of the night sky. So when I asked everyone what they were seeing that would causing them to have these problems, I heard about dew heaters causing artifacts, pinched optics, over-tightened glass elements or mirrors. I heard about a lot of things. I narrowed it down to the imaging train though, because I knew I had placed the dew shield that I did share between the 2 scopes on in different orientations, and yet the star spikes were the same and in the same orientation. I knew it couldn't be the dew heater ring as I had them at very different settings during the imaging run. One was set pretty low, one was set a lot higher as the humidity increased. It would be unlikely that both units would have pinched optics in the exact same way, so I figured it must be the imaging train. As I started taking parts off the scope, I noticed that the biggest offender ended up being my SCT to M42 adapter. This adapter is what goes from the SCT threading, and I used this hilarious amount of things to adapt it up to M54 so it fit my scope. But on the inside here, it's a little shiny and there are some nicks on the shoulder that sticks in the most. And apparently that's enough to cause reflection and this structured junk around the bright stars, especially in deep space astrophotography where you're stretching really, really faint data. So it wasn't the telescope making bad stars. This was the imaging train creating an artifact because of a suboptimal quality of a piece of equipment that I was using. So yeah, so here's the setup that gave me the bad stars. SCT into this narrow chain of adapters, and then all of these extensions, and then the camera would sit here. And here's how I fixed it with what I had available in my extension drawer at the time. I switched to a much wider, more open connection method. I used this SCT to 2-inch eyepiece adapter. And then I used M54 all the way out to a 2-inch eyepiece connection here. This swap did give me my stars back, and I just slide the camera in here. A caveat though, using this connection method made exact backspacing very hard because it's hard to get exactly right and measure things. So if the stars look a little bit softer on night 2, that's the trade-off that I had to make to eliminate the artifacts and keep the data trustworthy. I have since ordered a new SCT to M48 adapter. I have an Amazon affiliate link below if you want a nice wide open connection. And the next time I do imaging on these, I should be able to get a better result. All right, here's the comparison rules. For processing, I took flats and I applied them. There was 28 exposures per stack after rejecting the worst 2. I did background extraction, photometric color correction, the Verilux hypermetric stretch with the same settings between stacks. And every time I show you a result, I'm going to show you the full frame, then we'll zoom into the center, and then we'll look at all 4 corners. With these scopes, the difference isn't going to be in the center, and I want to highlight that. The differences in the debate lives out near the edges of the images at these bigger APS-C sizes. Enough yapping. M34, the truth serum test. So we're going to start with this, and from night 1, again, disregard the artifacts in the star halos. We know what caused those now, and it wasn't any of the optical elements within the telescopes themselves. This is the Starfield truth. All right, as expected, center performance looks really strong on both. So if you're trying to, justify to yourself the cost of a new EdgeHD, it's not going to be because the center of the image suddenly becomes sharper or clearer. It's what happens out here in the corners when you use one of these bigger sensors that justifies the difference in cost. Now, before we go any further, I want to show something that explains maybe why people on the internet are having sort of different senses of an argument like this. So a lot of people aren't using APS-C cameras like the 2600, right? So I'm going to put up on the image, or I'm going to put up on the screen a full frame from the ASI 2600 on the non-edge. So this is the one with the bad corners. And now I'm going to overlay a rectangle showing what a 533 sensor would look like. So this is a ASI 533 mm Pro. The pixels are basically the same, but it's a smaller square. And you can see what that looks like overlaid. And this is what the 533 would have seen in that exact same configuration. So if you shoot on a 533, you're almost living entirely in that center sweet spot. You may not ever even touch any of those scary corners. And this is without the reducer corrector. I know a lot of people really love the new 585 sensors in the Air and the Pro. And so I'm going to overlay now what the IMX 585 sensor would see in this same image. It's even smaller, even more center only. So if you're on a 533 or a 585 camera, and that's your main imaging setup, a regular C8 can look honestly pretty incredible. And in those use cases, the EdgeHD can feel a little bit like overkill. But the second you go APS-C, the outer field there, that's where the EdgeHD starts earning its price difference. All right, let's look at M76. M76 is something I would actually now want to get more time on because I want to post it. It's small, it's detailed, it does reward clean stars out in the edges, but for the big cats, a small planetary target like this is its bread and butter. This is the kind of target where the messy stars might steal the show and make it feel like the image isn't as high quality as you wanted. So now let's go on to the images that I was able to get night 2. And again, this is not the same test that I ran on night 1. This is sort of a value hack test. So the Celestron C8 with this f6.3 reducer, can you use this and a crop to match the edge framing? And do you actually lose out any detail or resolution because of that? So some quick definitions. Reducer slash corrector is, the one specifically for the C8, makes the telescope act like a shorter focal length, wider field, faster telescope. It does give you a flatter field, it does give you a flatter focal plane so that the stars in the middle of the frame are in focus and the ones out to the edge will also be in focus. We'll discuss what cropping is. Think of cropping sort of like cutting the crust off your peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You are definitely throwing away some of your image, some of that, stuff that you paid for, and you're cutting in. You aren't adding more detail, and any zoom that happens is purely because you can just make the image bigger at that point. So here's M34 with the full frame just out of the reducer. And here is the crop box that matches the framing in the EdgeHD. And then here's the cropped version compared to the EdgeHD version. This is where the classic C8 starts punching way above its weight. You improve the usable field, and then you crop away the worst edges. So this is part of that value conversation. How close can you get, and what trade-offs are you accepting? So let's just do a quick beginner's takeaway. The EdgeHD and the native F10 C8 stack sampled at around 0.38 arc seconds per pixel, and the reducer stack sampled at around 0.61 arc seconds per pixel. Arc seconds per pixel is basically how much of the night sky is represented in each individual pixel. On the nights that we took these images, my star sizes were like 4 to 5 arc seconds, which tells me that the atmosphere or my guiding or my collimation was a major limiting factor in the tightness of the stars, not the resolution of the resulting image. All right, if you want to try and take really cool images or videos of planets, here's the honest answer. I don't expect the EdgeHD to make a huge difference in the final quality of planetary imaging. Planets, usually when you're trying to do planets, they sit in the center of your telescope, and both scopes are fairly strong in the center. What's going to matter more for your planetary imaging is seeing, collimation, letting it cool down enough, the quality of your Barlow, an atmospheric dispersion corrector, and if you have a high enough frame rate camera. The Edge can be nicer in some practical ways, like being less annoying to keep the temperature inside stable because it's got these really cool vents, but it's not going to magically give you more detail. And if your primary interest in this hobby is visual astronomy, then a classic C8 is one of the best values, I think, in this hobby. Most of what you care about when you're doing visual is near the center, and you'll get a lot more impact in your enjoyment by putting that price difference into higher quality eyepieces, dew control methods, or comfort upgrades like a nice observing chair. Final verdict this time. If you're imaging with the 2600 or any of its cousins, APS-C size sensors, the EdgeHD is definitely worth it if you don't want to fuss with reducers or cropping images in post. If you're on a smaller sensor like a 533 or especially the 585, the classic C8 can look amazing because you're mostly using that center sweet spot. And if you pair in one of these reducer correctors, the results can become even more amazing. So if you're on a budget, a classic C8 plus this f6.3 reducer and a crop, because you're either using the APS-C sensor or the smaller sensors themselves, those things can be really amazing. And if you're visual or planetary first, the classic C8 honestly is going to usually be my recommendation. And for me personally, the biggest lesson from this whole experiment is sometimes the real problem with your images isn't your telescope or how much you spent on it at all. Sometimes it's one old shiny adapter in the imaging train that's been beaten up and might have some scuffs and nicks on the inside, causing your stars to look all weird. All right, if this saved you a clear night of troubleshooting, you can support the channel by joining the YouTube membership. Special thanks to my current members. Actually, let me say that. Let me rephrase that. Special thanks to my current member. You can also send a super like. I've had a couple people do that, and that's always really nice to see. And down in the comments, let me know what camera you're using on your SCTs. Are you using a 585 and not worrying about the edges, or using an APS-C and a really fancy reducer? Because that one detail, I think, really changes people's perception of one of the oldest continuous production telescopes in the market. Again, thank you for watching. I'm Francisco for Deep Sky Lab. If you found this video sort of humorous or interesting, I've got a whole playlist of versus videos where we try and do comparisons that maybe are a little bit different than what you're used to. Clear skies.